Hi there! Welcome to a new video on the Sugardoo channel. Today we're going to talk about low volume fabrics. It's less busy, it is just a little bit quieter. It doesn't pop out that much. With our Dutch Modern Quilt Guild we have a quarterly theme, and the theme of this quarter is low volume. So I was cutting and folding some fabrics for the get-together, and then I thought, let's cut and fold some more to put some low volume fabric bundles in the shop. And while I was doing that, I thought maybe I could film a video about low volume to show you what low volume fabric look like, what it is, and what you can use it for. So low volume fabrics, I guess the main characteristics is that they are low volume, so that means they are not so loud. They are a little bit quieter than other quilting fabric. And the quilting fabric that I have is mostly very loud, so the colors are really intense, very saturated prints, saturated colors, so that makes it really bright and happy. And I guess low volume is a little bit the opposite of that. So it's quieter, it's less contrast, it has not necessarily only black and white or white and gray. You do also have low volume fabric that has color in it. So for example, when you would have a white fabric and you would have tiny pink flowers on it, it could still be a low volume fabric. Low volume doesn't mean that there can't be any color in it, but it's just that there is a lot less color and that the fabrics are, I think, easier blendable in backgrounds, for example. Yeah, just a little bit quieter than bold prints. So I just said that easy blendable for backgrounds. And that is also where I use low volume fabrics for mostly. So here you see a pile of low volume fabrics, and these are all white and grayish. I love to use that with the colorful fabrics that I use a lot. And then I mostly put this in the background. So I have a few example quilts over here which I will show you. But yeah, so what you see here is some gray on gray, and then the pattern can be pretty busy. There could be a lot going on. So for example, this top fabric, there's a lot going on in the print, but due to the contrast is very low, it's a gray fabric with a grayish print on it, it could still go as a low volume. So I think it's also not really strict to say this is low volume and this is not. There's of course a gray area in between. But yeah, I think this kind of shows the feel of low volume. Also, when I Google low volume quilting fabric, then you also get an idea. Here you already see some more color and different types of fabrics, but the main feel is that it's less busy. It is just a little bit quieter. So let me show you some quilts and tell you how I use low volume in them. And I think with all of them I use colorful fabrics on the front, on the items in the quilt design, and then low volume fabrics in the background. This large quilt, for example, this is my tree house quilt. There it is. It's too big to show you completely. Yeah, but there is a lot of color in the trees and in the houses, and then you have low volume fabrics with a little bit of color in them in the background. And it's not that it's not a solid, so it's not completely what's the word for it? It's not completely a boring fabric in the background, so there is a lot going on because there is pattern in it. But when you look at it from a distance, it doesn't pop out that much. So the background fabric is really nice and quiet, so that makes the trees pop out. Yeah, I think that is something that low volume fabric is very good at, to put the focus on the rest of the quilt design. So here I have a mini quilt with rain boots and an umbrella, and this background fabric, I use just one type of background fabric in this one. It's a low volume, but it's a little bit orangey brownish. So this is not white or gray or black and white, but it is low volume. It's not a solid. There is print on it, but it's really subtle. Then this one, I really like how this turned out. So for this one, I used a lot of different fabrics for the background, but they are all low volume. So when you look at it from a distance, they really go well together, and all the low volume fabrics are still, the main color in them is the same, so they are from the same fabric line. It was a fabric line by Zen Chic for Moda. So the background in the low volumes is the same, but the prints on them are different. And that makes the quilt more interesting to look at, I think. But still, you have that popping of the color due to the low volume in the back. So I really like how this turned out due to using different types of low volume fabrics, combining them, and it's still not getting too crazy busy because they all are in the same color. And then these three quilts, they all have just one low volume fabric in the background. So I picked one and used it for the whole mini quilt, and that you could say it makes it a little bit safer or more boring for the quilt. This one is a little bit more interesting, but what it also does is that it really puts the focus only on the item. So here I have the little bunny in the corner, and the rest, I think from there it even looks like a solid, but it is a low volume fabric by Karen Lewis. And then you can really focus on the quilting. So when you look at it from up close, you really see the quilted lines, because it is a very quiet low volume. You can really see the quilting. So that is nice for this quilt. On the back you can see it even better. Of course, because you then don't have the bunny and more contrast in the color of the thread and the background. But yeah, I think this is also a good thing about using low volume or even solids when you really want to focus on the quilting, because the quilting just really shows. Then on this one, what I did over here was use one background low volume fabric, and then I used a color thread to quilt it. So then your low volume fabric makes a nice canvas to use color on, because the background doesn't have a lot of color. Yeah, so then the color really shows nicely on the front of the quilt on the low volume fabric. On this one I used also just one fabric for the background, and a low volume, also by Karen Lewis. And I picked this one for this quilt because it blends nicely with the belly of the owl. And what this does is makes the quilt really soft, because this color really suits the owl, and it doesn't make a lot of contrast. So this is a kind of soft color, and this beige as well. So it makes a very soft feel of the quilt. When you would go for maybe a bit whiter or darker even, that you're going for maybe a gray like this, or a little bit brighter gray, then it would have, I think, a little bit more contrast. Depends on the color of the gray, but that could make a color green like this pop up a little bit more. But with this one, it's really nice and soft. So yeah, that's some examples of how I use low volume fabrics in quilts. And I think it's really fun to experiment with it. So if you're now choosing solids for backgrounding your quilt, or always going for a particular one background fabric because you've used that before and you're very comfortable with it, I would challenge you to try to pick some low volume fabrics, or to mix and match them, because as you could see in this one, I did it in a kind of a safe way because they're the same color in the background, but mixing and matching different types of low volume fabrics. For example, if you would use this whole pile, tiny parts of it of course, but tiny pieces. So if you would use this whole pile to make a background on a quilt, it would be really cool and interesting, I guess, because there's a lot to look at, and it just makes your quilt more lively than using a lot of the same. So my quilts that you see over here are pretty safe. They use one of the same color or one of the same fabric for the background, and that works out nicely, but it looks really cool to mix and match that up, and that's also a learning process. So for me, most of these quilts I've made some time ago already, and I am learning in that as well. I'm learning that moving away from safe fabric choices will give you more interesting quilts. So I'm curious, are you also using low volume fabrics? Do you like them a lot or not? What kind of low volumes do you use? Please leave it down in the comment section below. I would love to read about how you use it and what you make with them. The fabric bundles that I'm making from these fabrics are now in my web shop, so I will put the link to that in the description down below, and hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!